Hello, and thank you so much for taking the time out to listen. Today, I titled this message, They Don't Want to Believe Their Loved One is Guilty. They don't want to believe their loved one is guilty. If you are a charming, nice-looking, smart, educated individual who grew up in an atmosphere that was not ghetto, was the type of atmosphere that was just normal, dare we say it, comfortable. There was no abuse, at least none that you would admit. It was just a typical childhood of playing, going to school, getting good grades, carrying on like any child would. And then, as time goes on, you do something that is totally shocking, disturbing, crazy. You make a decision that blows your relatives' minds, and they don't want to believe. They don't want to believe that you are guilty. Guilty of starting some mess with someone. Guilty of making a mistake. Guilty of being at the wrong place at what you thought was the right time. You were being sneaky, but they're not going to believe that you have a dark side. Those individuals who get away with so much, part of the reason why they get away with so much evil, so much dark, disturbing behavior is because they got folks convinced that they would never, ever do the types of things that they do. We know that there's some wickedness in the world. Lots and lots of wickedness, actually. And those of us who are believers, we've read the word of the Lord, and we know that God, He is not taking sin lightly. Matter of fact, He punishes. There's consequences. There's people on the run as we speak because of some of the wickedness that they got themselves wrapped up in. A family that hasn't been updated in years about their loved one is not going to believe that he or she is capable of something like murder, for instance. No. Or rape. They're not going to believe that back in the day when I knew him, he would have never. But yet those that have been victimized, those who have been troubled by these individuals, who go back and say, but let me tell you about your brother, your sister, your mother, your cousin, your niece, your nephew. Is it really worth having to deal with the denial? You shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. He's a good boy. He would never. I don't know who put you up to coming over here telling these lies, but my sister would never, ever. I mean, wait a minute. Hold up. My mother did. My daddy what? My uncle, my aunt. No, that's my favorite niece, my best friend. You can't tell me that they did these things. For some people, you got all the proof in the world, and they're still going to say, not mine. We got some folks who are very ignorant, very gullible. We got some folks who can't seem to think out of the little boxes of their minds. You can dangle somebody in front of them who is quite charming, who's good looking, who's young, who's smart, who's educated, and tell them he murdered. She prostituted herself. He stole. She is a manipulator. No. What were you thinking? I was thinking that it was somebody ugly, somebody, just fat, somebody scary looking, or somebody who was dark, or somebody who grew up in this neighborhood or that one. You see? Meanwhile, the very one that they think should fit the profile is the nicest person and never did hurt another individual. And the one who they say, no, doesn't fit the profile is the guilty one. Guilty as charged. Now, this particular message, I'm going to say some things that's going to possibly make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. And I'm going to start in childhood, where there were some things that I observed that others, the adults back then, didn't observe about some of my relatives. Some of them very nice looking, but very, very disturbed. Some of them very smart, but definitely had a dark side. When I was a child, I remember those individuals who didn't mind hurting an animal. I remember those individuals who didn't mind talking about what they did to animals. Okay? Some of you all who are into psychology, you're going to say, some of what she's saying, that sounds like serial killer type of, personalities. I don't know if they ended up going around killing some folks physically, but I will say this. I know that spiritually they killed some folks. I know that verbally they killed some folks. And I know they physically beat some folks. And in old audio, I talked about hearing children yelling because the father had taken an extension cord and had beat them. Prior to beating them, he had made them take their clothes off. And I heard the yelling, the crying, the screaming. And I couldn't say a word because I was so caught up in my own fear. I didn't tell folk too much of anything. I was but maybe a mere 4 years old. These individuals, children who just said things that were strange, had tripped up on some things they had no business looking at, such as pornography. And some of them saw actions live. And others had been sexually abused. Okay? Now, these are children that we're just playing or we're just having a good time, but there's something weird about them. And as a child looking at children, I don't know how to explain nor how to really feel what they're saying, what they're doing, what they're getting themselves mixed up in. All I know is it's bad, and I don't want to be a part of it. But fear at times had my stomach in my throat, and I wasn't about to be the tattletale or the snitch. Some of them had a fascination with fire, like to get a hold of lighters and just stare at the fire or act like they were going to burn us. Okay? Some of them like to see little bugs or strange things and step on them or pull them apart or just do some weird things with insects. One decided to take fire and put it on the head of an insect and watch the back part of the insect just move around. These individuals, all of them had something that was common besides, of course, tripping up on some sexual type of materials. But they also all come from backgrounds where the family wasn't wrapped too tight. Poor, broke, busted, and disgusted folks who talk to children in the same way that they would talk to adults, cussing and fussing and hitting and doing any number of things to children. The child abuse definitely was prevalent. Like I said, I personally heard the screams. And sometimes I would see where children showed up with black eyes, markings on faces or on arms. And there were quite a few who pulled their arms out, and I was like, "Oh, what is that?" And they said, "Oh, my daddy, he would burn me with cigarettes. Those are scars." Why would he do that? Because I was talking smart, or I was in the way, or he was drinking. Or my mom, she would do this and do that. Of course, all of these children were growing up pretty quickly, and in time, I would hear through the grapevine that they had drug and alcohol issues. Kind of walked in the footsteps of their family members, huh? Because, of course, I would hear, as well as back in the day, recall their mothers acting strange, their dads acting weird. Yeah. Later on, I learned drug and alcohol abuse. These same children were the ones who had peeked in on their sisters and brothers and parents, peeked in, looking at them while they're clothed or unclothed, or doing something to the neighbor's child, or doing something with an adult. And now they were adults, and some of them still didn't mind peeking through the crack of a door, or through a peephole, or a window outside. Some of them were relatively smart, other ones not so much. I'm telling you that to talk to some of them when they were children and I was a child, I was frustrated at times talking to them because their eyes was here, there, and everywhere, and they seemed to be a bit distracted. And then there were those who were just distant and didn't want to be bothered and would get upset if you talked too long or if you reached out and touched them or something, you know? I felt like I was walking on eggshells around all these disturbed type of children. And then later on in life, to feel those same feelings being around these adults who were now the users and the abusers. These same individuals are the ones who learned over the years how to be quite charming, how to make sure that they always look good. Some anyway. They at some point cracked open a book, or they talked to somebody who was smarter than them, and now, sounds like you're a little smart. Right? A bit educated. But why, oh why, would they end up doing the types of things that would cause their own parents and others to say, "Not my child"? Well, with all of what I just talked about, doomed from the start, huh? But for these relatives and family, family friends, or, anyone who's close to you to say that they don't believe, meanwhile, they know what they did to the child, or maybe they're in denial about that. Some of what you did led the child into a lifestyle that is embarrassing. It's disturbing. And you might as well deal with that fact. But we got some relatives that, once again, don't come over here with that. I don't want to believe that. We even got others who will protect certain relatives and say, "Don't say anything that'll break mama, daddy, cousin's heart." These folks ended up producing children, Lord Jesus. Oh, yes. And some of the children, believe it or not, turned out to be okay. But other ones, they're just as dirty and rotten and disgusting and disturbing as their fathers, mothers, and others in the family. And some of them never met the folks who I grew up with, but yet they got their ways. DNA is a powerful thing. These children turned adults had another thing that was quite common. They had these devious minds. They didn't mind cussing and saying real nasty stuff while they would tell us, shh, be quiet. And then those that were bold enough to end up tattling, even back then, no, you know what? She ain't nothing but a little liar. Yeah, just like her mama. So what happened? They would stop tattling because the adults wouldn't believe them. And so I say all that to say that before you're the one who quickly says, no, she would never or he would never, think again. Before you're the one that wants to start taking sides, think again. The evidence is going to show up one day. Whether evidence is going to be physical or verbal or what have you. But God, if you walk with him long enough, he's going to use some folks to tell you some things that you really don't want to believe about your dear loved one. He is going to take those blinders off your eyes. He is going to be the one, if once again you walk with him long enough, who's going to shield you from any further damage. He's going to be the one that will tell you, you don't want your children mixed up with that group. You don't want to trust that aunt or that uncle or that sister or brother. I don't care how nice they are. I don't care how good looking they are. I don't care that they make so much money and they're educated and they got this thing and that thing going on. You don't want to expose your loved ones to this person or these family members. Take heed to that feeling on the inside that something's not right. Pay close attention to what you see and what you hear, or what the children come and tell you, adult, about what happened between family members or at the last holiday event or in school, or what a third party told you through somebody else who knows somebody, and you know how it goes. And then it is your responsibility to protect that child. It's your responsibility to speak the truth and do away with the lies. This is one of those messages that's just food for thought, because I feel in my spirit that some of you all are going to trip up on some information and you're not going to want to believe it. And I'm telling you in the name of Jesus that God has his reasons, and he wants you to be proactive in speaking the truth, in protecting those who cannot protect themselves, in creating the distance, and not being the one to go along with programming. There are those who grew up, like I said, I don't know from personal experience if they ended up being serial killers, but they sure had some ways about them that was serial killer-like. But what I did hear through the grapevine over the years was that some of them were definitely troubled as a result of what they had experienced as children. And we always did feel like some of them wasn't wrapped too tight. When you have that feeling that something's not right, believe it. I thank you as always for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen. You've been listening to YouTube, Enterprise 7. Feel free to like, subscribe, comment. We do also welcome giving and thank you in advance.